We're going to get going. So welcome. My name's Ian Grant. I'm the Executive Director of UNH's Entrepreneurship Center, or the ECenter. I know for a lot of you, this is your first time here, so welcome. In the back corner, actually, is where the co-working space is. Free nitro brewed coffee. So if you ever want to come back here, just know that that's there, and a bunch of our programs. A couple of housekeeping things before I introduce Tim Collins tonight. First, a couple things coming up for summer. So we have a summer internship program at startups. It's 15 startups. You get paid $4,000 to work with a founder or co-founder. Generally is in Maine, New Hampshire, sort of Massachusetts, Boston area. The deadline for that is February 14th. So if you go to the eCenter website, take a look at that. It's also, there's a flyer here with a QR code if you want to get that the way out. Amazing program, open to first-year students, sophomores, and juniors. Also, we have a program in the summer called the Summer Seed Grant. That's if you have your own idea, no matter what stage it is. Could be something you just thought of yesterday. You get paid $4,000 to work on that over the summer with a group of mentors to help you with that. That can be either here, based out of the eCenter, or it can be virtual. So another opportunity on the flip side, basically your summer job is to work on your own idea. Coming up on February 26th, we are a co-sponsor at Boston University's IDEA Conference called IdeaCon down in Boston. Really neat program, a lot of different workshops. If you have sort of the drive and ambition and curiosity for social innovation, regular startups, anything like that, it's a really great program. We charter a bus, we go down, there's about 50 spots. I think we have about 15 or 20 left. So if that's something that interests you, check it out again on our website. Also, any first-year students here? All right, a couple first-year students. So we have a program that's for sophomores only called the Shaw Innovation Explorers Program. Again, if you have an interest in anything creative or innovation, it's a program heavily designed to be off-campus for field trips. Comes with a $3,500 scholarship. The current group, over part of spring break, are going out to Austin, Texas, to the South by Southwest conference. Really, really neat program. See me afterwards if you have interest in that. That's limited to 16 students this year. Pretty competitive, but a neat program. At the very end, so just wait. When Tim wraps up, we'll do our traditional raffle as well. So everybody hopefully got a raffle ticket. We'll drop raffle tickets. I think tonight is Hop and Grind.
$10 Hop and Grind, also valid at Rise and Grind.
Perfect. Great. Okay, so we're going to now get to the key part of why you're here for the workshop. So Tim Collins, a UNH alum, class of '85, CEO of EBSCO Information. I always call it EBSCO, Information Services. Part of which he actually started here as an undergrad, so I'm not going to take away all his thunder because he goes through a lot of that. And recently inducted into UNH's Entrepreneur Hall of Fame. So with that, Tim, thanks very much.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. Let's see how that goes at the end, if I get any claps. I don't know. We'll see. All right. Company culture. So what we're going to do today is have a session where I share some thoughts about this topic from my experience, but it's going to have a lot of activities, so it'll be very much something we'll actually do some work as well. And so I want to talk a little bit about the purpose of this. And so this meeting is for you all. It's not for me. I understand what our culture is at the company. I understand the principles we followed. The point of this is to try to make it useful to you. And if you're involved in getting started with a company, I want to help enable you to avoid a mistake I made. I focused on the principles part of this. I'll be talking about key principles that the company followed throughout its 36-year plus, whatever it is, history. But I didn't actually focus on that. I didn't actually write down the principles until year 7. And I did it because I could tell we were onto something. I thought the company could get big. But I just couldn't get people to really see the light, and I couldn't get them to work hard enough and work smart enough to make it happen. So I was pissed. I'm like, what is the deal? Why don't they see this vision? And so I wrote out some of these things, and I'm really glad I did it. I didn't do the culture part of it, and culture is, for me, defined as kind of how we treat each other. So I got individual parts of it, how you operate yourself, how you show up, and then how you work with others, how you treat others. I didn't write that until, I think it's year 31. And I did that because I ended up taking on responsible for a bunch of other companies, and I would go around to these companies, and we had purchased a lot of companies, and I'd sit down and I'd be in a meeting, and I could tell I can tell you exactly why this company's failing. It's the culture. And I go to another one and say, this company's not working great yet, but it's going to succeed because of the culture. And so I thought, I'm going to write this down. And so there's some stuff in here that I've created, but when I say I've created, I just went back to all the folks who helped build the business. No one person builds a business, right? I said, help me write down all the things of all the people that have been really successful here. What are their individual attributes that you see as in common? And then what do you see about how they treat others? So a lot of stuff here that I'll just tell you it's worked for me. It's a pretty big company and all, and I want it to work for you. So if you want to get involved in starting a company, do it day one or first year or something. If you're not going to get involved in starting a company, this is the kind of stuff, what you can get out of it is you can be thinking about the type of company you want to work in, and you can ask questions about culture in interviews. When people do that, it's kind of impressive to folks. It's like, oh, they actually have thought about it. They're mature. They're talking about these things which anybody worth their salt who's been successful understands the importance of culture. So when somebody asks about that in an interview, it's actually a pretty good thing, and it will help you too. And regardless of your career choice, just trying to give you a little sense of what it takes to be successful in business from somebody who's done okay, but we have some turkeys. We've made a lot of acquisitions, a lot of things. Not everything's worked, and so we've learned from it. And but overall, it's been a good story. In terms of the schedule, so I'll be going really fast. I'm a fast talker anyway. I'll try to keep us on schedule. We have these activities. Y'all have your little handouts, and I'll go through and tell you what they kind of how they work when it's time. And then we have a little session where you'll do your individual part of it, and then a group part, and then we'll do that with our principles, and then we'll do it with our culture. And so I've got my watch right here. You can help me. I think I might be a little over in the first part, but I think I'll catch up. But I want to try to get through it all because it's really about you, and it's got to be something useful for you. And so I want to make the point about, it's really obvious, but I think it's useful to make this point. I do it every time when I do a session like this. The amount that you'll get out of this will be directly proportionate to the amount you put into it. And so if you're kind of here and you look out the window and you can get away with that, right? We're not going to test you on this. We're not going to ask you for the handout, at the end to see if you did it. If you do that, you're not going to get much out of it. That's your choice. If you actually get into it and you take it seriously, you can get a lot out of this because you'll have put a lot into it. And so whenever I send people to training or go to trainings, I always tell them that, you determine if this is going to be any good or not. And think of it as, hey, I'm here. I might as well get something out of it. I'm going to devote 2 hours to culture, get the best I can out of that. So hope you take it seriously and you end up with something that can help you in your career. Okay, so why did they actually ask me to do it? And so I co-founded this company when I was in 83. And I know I look really young and everything. It's pretty impressive. No? Yeah, okay. So when I was in 83 is when we started it. I actually graduated in 85, and so I was actually doing the beginning of this business when I was up here. And so a lot of good stories about, I would occasionally might cut a class or two to go out on a sales call and things like that and do some travel. We grew the business over time. We actually sold it. We're a different story. We sold it, and I say we, my stepfather and I started it. He was kind of the editorial guy. I was kind of the business sales guy. He retired like early 90s, and I sort of ran it and took it off from there. But that was fun. So I was president, and my stepfather worked for me. That was always interesting, in college. So the group, we sold it. We were very small because we didn't have any money, and I was having a hard time raising money. I was raising money from the parents of my high school friends and from friends of my parents who were it was like mercy investments. These guys are nice enough. I feel like I have to give them some money. That's how we got started. We wanted more money, so we actually sold the company and used their funding, and then it grew from there. It's $1 billion in sales. Now, the thing that I started is $1 billion plus in sales. In 2013, it was merged with another company of $1 billion. So now it's a $2 billion plus enterprise. This slide, I won't take the time on it. It does a lot of things. So there's a lot of activity. You might have heard of as EBSCOhost. If you go to the library and you do your online searching and you pull up an article from Harvard Business Review or from an academic thing, you're probably using our service. We're the largest in the world at that. It can be branded EBSCOhost or it gets branded by the university. But anyway, that's our thing. But it's a lot of different things. And the point of that, I'm not going to tell you the whole story. We don't have time for the story of the first product. But the point here is that the 2 points are these very attractive call-outs. You can see my PowerPoint skills are awesome. And so for me, this is actually pretty good. Your product line will evolve to meet market needs. So the first thing we created it still exists, but it's a teeny part of what we do now. And so that's an important point because you can have a pride of authorship and or ownership, and this is your idea, and damn it, it's going to work. You'll probably fail. You actually have to have your customers tell you whether it's any good, and then you basically change all your products to meet the customer needs. But that took me a few years to figure that out, really. The other is create competitive differentiation and then sell, sell, sell. These are my only two kind of business points because this is about principles and culture. But I thought about it. These are the two I would make sure you think about. Competitive differentiation is do something, meet a need better than the other guy. We had a teeny little product, but we beat our competition in two key points. And that company that we competed with owned it. It was sort of the Kleenex of this service. It was the Bible. And 10 years ago, so we were huge. They were huge. We were these little people, Tim cutting class doing it. And 10 years ago, we actually bought that company. So if you do this stuff, it can work. All right, so now we're going to get into the actual meat of it. So this slide, we're not going to go through, but I just wanted to mention here that what I'm going to share with you tonight is actually something that exists for the company, and we call it the EBSCO way, just the way we do things. And so any employee that comes in will go through training on what I'm about to tell you. Now, good news for you is that we have 2 hours and you have a lot of activities. They get 4 hours with no activities. And I just go through all these things in detail. I tell stories. That's how important I think it is. And what happens is, it's always kind of funny, in that presentation, there's usually a couple hundred people, and because that's about how much fit in our big conference room. And usually about a third is really into it, a third is paying attention. There's always one person that falls asleep. Now, can you picture falling asleep, like in your training session with the top guy in the company, and you fall asleep, and then we have a pretty bad, right? And so we have a little thing, I shouldn't say this, you turn off that camera for a little bit. No, I'm kidding. What we do is we have an internal little bet as to how long it will take for them to quit or be fired. Because if you fall asleep during not good. But so this comes from a company thing. It's very slick and all. So that's the background of it. The activity, so you take your sheet, is we'll have an individual exercise. We're going to take 5 minutes for you to fill out a worksheet. And what we want you to do is just come up with a list of up to 8 principles that you think you'd like to see your company embrace. And so I'm going to go through 10. So the reason I had you only do 8 is I think we probably have too many. And so if we had more time for the activity, I'd be asking you to give me feedback on which ones I could get rid of. Because 10 is probably a little much, We probably need 6 to 8. So try to go up to 8. And you can use principles you hear from me. So I'm going to have a slide per principle. I'm going to talk about it. And if that's resonating with you, you could write it down and say, I like that one. That's cool. Or you might write it down in a way that's a little different. You might word it differently. Or you might be like, it's not working for me. Again, if you're not looking out the window and you're really engaged, you might be going, actually, I don't like the way he did that, but I like this. And you'll create your new one. So at the end of that, you're paying attention, you're writing it down. At the end, you'll have, some ideas, and then we'll give you 5 minutes to kind of think about it and write it down. Then we'll have a group exercise. We'll come together by table, I guess, because that's you're kind of grouped by whether you're starting a company or not. And then take 8 minutes for a little discussion. You get to select a spokesperson. So that's the first thing I do. Who's going to talk? We'll only call on 1 or 2. So we're not going to tell you who though. So you actually have to kind of be ready. And then just share was there one EBSCO principle that kind of really resonated? What was the one that really people thought really was the most important? Then come up with a new one from the group. People can throw out, hey, I thought of a new one. And so this isn't, it's supposed to be interesting for you and for you to come up with new ideas. And then ideally, if you have time, you could review some new ideas with your group. And you review those ideas and say, hey, this is the one I think we'll talk about, but it'll generate ideas for you. Okay, so you ready for the meat of this, which is going to take 10 minutes, and we have 6 minutes to do it. So I'm going to be 4 minutes over, I think, but that's okay. All right, so this is the list of 10. Any questions? All right, great. The first one is realize that business is a long-run game. So it's not about making sales and maximizing profit in the short run. So the reason I have this as the first one is it's amazing how in business a lot of folks get focused on just the next 3 months, 6 months, or 1 year budget, and they don't think in terms of the outlook, the longer-term outlook. And I've always worked for a private company, and a private company has an advantage over a public company because public companies have to worry about their next quarterly report, or they have to worry about how they did that year, and so forth. Private company just worries about how they do over the long run. And we've beaten a lot of public companies just because of this point. We have take a longer view. If you take a short-term view, you might say, this company, it's not, this product line isn't doing that well. It's year 3. It should have been doing better. It's not going to do well till year 6. I need to make my profit. I'm going to sell it or I'm going to close it. That's a good decision if you're a short-term outlook. It's a terrible decision if you're a long-term outlook. So what you do if it's long-term outlook, you keep it going, and then in year 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, you're doing really great. So it's not about short-term, and it's about creating value for the customers to secure the new and repeat or renewal business. And so it's about that reputation you're building and making sure that customers come back. And so you're not just thinking about getting the sale. You're thinking about getting and if it's a renewal business, like a subscription where they have to buy each year, you're thinking about the renewal, or you're thinking about if it's a disposable item, the next time they need to buy that item, or if it's not disposable, it's not subscription, you're thinking about word of mouth. So if you get the sale with a bad product and you don't support it well, they're not going to tell their friends to buy it. And so you can do really well for a year or two, but then word gets out that your product's not very good, and you're going to have no business anymore. So that's why it's the number one. Invest in people and cultivate passion. So this is about realizing that your idea can be really great, but if you don't have the right people in place and the right approach, you're going to fail. So there's a great quote by Peter Drucker. Anybody know who Peter Drucker is? Yeah. The old guy knows who Peter Drucker is? That's it? Yeah. No, so we had a couple. I can't exactly, he's a renowned professor. And I call him the old guy. It's bad. I know. It's probably got in trouble for that. Because I'm so young. So his quote is, "Culture eats strategy for breakfast." And so if you think my strategy is the most important thing, well, you can have the best strategy in the world, but if you don't have people to actually execute, you're going to fail. So culture is actually more important than strategy. You got to have both, really, but you're not going to work. And so what we do, we just say, hey, we want to give people what they actually want. This is what we think, have developed over time. What we think people want: the clarity of the roles and expectations. Like, what do you want from me? What can I do to make the company more successful? They want responsibility. Good people want to own something, want to have responsibility. They don't want to be told what to do every 2 seconds. They want to know what the goals are, what the expectations are. They want responsibility to do it. Freedom to make decisions and share feedback. They want to be able to be heard, and they want to be able to make their own decisions. Opportunities to learn and earn more. And so you want to give them that, right? Because if your company's here and it wants to be here, how is that going to happen? You're going to hire people and they're going to go from their role to this role. So you want them to be successful, right? The feeling of satisfaction from work successes and fair treatment. That satisfaction at the end of the day, after you hope they all do great and you meet all your goals, and there's, financial goals are important in life. You got to pay the bills and everything. But after you've made money, you'll realize that money is really not the most important thing. It's actually the feeling of fulfillment from the satisfaction from your successes. It's really not the money. Fair treatment. People want to be treated fairly. Fair treatment has a negative component. Fair treatment, I'll talk about later, means you hold them accountable. Fairness is not just, everything's going great. Lead with humility. I love this line. Our team takes our business very seriously, yet we don't take ourselves too seriously. And so the folks that have been around a long time, it's a culture of a lot of goofing on each other, kind of fun culture. But we take the business very seriously, and so we really want to do the best we can, but we have fun with it. And then I think ego is probably the biggest career killer ever. And so when people get excited about themselves and feeling good about themselves, and they start to talk in terms of I did this, and the whole thing can just kind of crumble. And so, we are very aggressive in managing that and making sure that leading with humility. We have a whole class on this. We have a 3-hour class with lead with humility. And when we find somebody kind of coming up in the company who's doing well, but they're getting a reputation, they're not leading with humility, I'll do the class with them. And there's one program we have, and we send them off for a week on how to lead with humility. And those are interesting conversations, I am humble. I'm not defensive. You're being defensive. It's those kind of things. All right, so then we have, so y'all paying attention? Not a whole lot of writing going on, so when you get done later, you have to remember all these. Okay, so we're going to go back and realize that business is a long-run game. I'm trying to help you out here, because when you get to the activity and you got nothing written down, you're going to be going, oh, I thought those were actually pretty good, or maybe one of them was, but I forgot to actually write it down. So now what am I going to talk about? Okay, so we got realize that business is a long-run game. Invest in people. Cultivate passion. Lead with humility. Realize business long-run game. Invest in people. Lead with humility. Now we have do what you say you will do. This is the old, kind of, almost like a golden rule, but you're only as good as your reputation. That statement is very true for businesses as well as individuals. I think we all know that you can build a reputation over years and you can screw it up in 5 minutes, in about 10 seconds. I could blow my reputation right now if I did something really crazy and you're filming it, right? And so you have to actually pay attention to that. And so companies are the same way. So you honor your commitments, and that'll build trust with your employees. It'll build trust with your customers as well. And we try to manage our customers' expectations. I learned this really early on. Someone told me that the key to successful renewals and customer satisfaction is so simple. It's really simple. You promise low, you deliver high. Period. Now, if you promise too low, you never get the sale, right? So you've got to promise something, but you don't overpromise. And people love to overpromise, This is going to be out next week with all these 28 features. Well, they only need 10 features for it to actually work. Why don't you promise the 10 features? And then just by not mentioning the other 18, if my numbers work, then when they come out every time, they're going to feel like they got something better every time. They're going to be so satisfied. I paid for this thing. It keeps getting better all the time, and they didn't have to do that. If you say you're going to have 28 features by a certain time, now they're mad at you because you only got 26 done. Whereas they would have been happy if you had 12. Simple stuff. I've seen companies waste millions of dollars over that. We said we'd commit to this. It's like, yeah, but then after you're halfway through, you realize that those last 3 features aren't even that useful, but you committed, so now you have to parade them. Okay, this is my favorite favorite principle. Operate with a defined vision and bias for action, or shortened vision and bias for action. And so the idea is that you have to come up with a vision, so you can't be thinking in terms of 3 months or 6 months. I need to go ahead and make that product, get that sale. You got to be thinking about what you look like in 3 to 5 years. And maybe it's 2 years, but at least a couple years out. And so you have that vision, then you set your goals around your vision, and then you get an action plan. So I know my vision, I want to be here in 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. Now I'm going to set my goals to get me there, and now I have to act. Then you measure from your activities, did it work or didn't it? You learn from that and you change your vision. So the key points here are your vision changes. It's a circle. So if you set a vision, like we're going to make this vision, and you don't actually learn and listen and change it, you will fail, basically. If you don't have a vision, you just keep operating, you never really know where you're trying to go, you'll fail as well. So I like to think of it in terms of balancing thinking with doing. And a lot of people, you feel productive if you're doing something. Like, I worked really hard today. I worked 12 hours. Man, I'm doing great. You might be, but you might be completely wasting your time. And so how much time did you actually think about what you were doing? And so one of the things, because I find people, they tend to go a little too much vision, too much bias for action. And so I talk about this with folks, like how would you think about yourself in that regard? And so I think you should be thinking about it yourself too. Are you the type that just kind of get going and you get up in the morning, you're working hard and you just sort of move and you do all this stuff, but maybe you didn't think through exactly what you did, and maybe you walked from here to there, to here, to there, to there, and you could have just thought a little bit and been more productive? I'm a bias for action guy. Wind me up and I'm off and I'm moving. So I have to actually schedule time pretty much every day to think. And what do you think is harder, doing or thinking? Thinking. It's really hard. It's hard to think. So got to balance it. If you think too much and all you do is think, you end up an academic businessman. You never accomplish anything because you've figured out that A plus B is C, then D, then E, then F, then G. And I figured this whole thing out. I'm going to be a $1 zillion company because all these things are going to happen. It's not going to happen that way. You should spend your time thinking about C and D. Really focus on getting A right, picking the right direction. Which B's am I going to go to? Am I going to go this direction, this direction? Maybe spend some time on C and maybe D. But that's it. Don't spend too much time out here. It's la la land. If you only focus on A and that's all you're focused on, you don't know where you're going. So got to balance them. All right, commit to sustained profit growth. A lot of companies, they don't always, profit can be like a bad word, like that's greedy. That's a bad thing. Profit's not a bad thing. That's actually how you determine whether you were successful or not. Could you create a product or service and do it in a way that you could charge enough that you cover your costs? If you're not, no matter how good your service is, it doesn't exist, right? Because you don't have enough money coming in to do your service. So profit is, to me, it's got to be in the principles, I think. It's really a focus. And when you grow your profit, this allows you to reinvest. And so we will tell that to folks. Like if you want us to employees, if you want us to do that next new idea, well, that's why we're so focused on profit, is because we want to do that next idea. And so you can go out and get other people's money and all that to some things, but eventually you got to be a sustained business and keep growing. So commit to sustained profit growth is the next one. So I think we're on number 8 or 9 or something. So you see, like, there's just too many. Like, I actually think we have like this 10 is probably too much, but it's because they're all good, I think. They all have like an idea that's useful and I want to talk about. And so we do talk about them, but it might be too much. Focus on the customer and the end user. So for us, because a lot of our business is for products that are used by students like yourself, but we actually sell it to the university or the library, we have to focus on both the end user, because you guys have to be satisfied, and the person who's buying it. And they can have very different needs. Students want to be very efficient, get things done efficiently. Sometimes the institution wants to not make it too easy, because they're actually trying to teach people how to fish, not just fish for them. And so it's an interesting dynamic. Do you do the fishing for them, make it really easy, if you know what I mean? Or do you kind of teach them how to do it? And so there's a balance. So if you talk to one and not the other, if you talk to the university, you get the sale, but nobody's ever going to use it, so you don't get the renewal. If you talk to just the students and you get a great product for them, but the buyers hate it, you're never going to buy it. So you have to kind of know early on who is using this product, who's buying it. Maybe they're the same person, maybe they're not, and really understand what they each want out of it. And so that's what that's about. Insist on quality from the start. Key points here. Quality must be built into every step. You can't accomplish quality after the fact. The idea of QC, quality control, the widgets are made, now I'm going to throw out the bad ones. That's not how it really operates. You need that, but you really want to be testing quality throughout the process to make sure that at the end of the day there are no errors, right? And so the old do your job right, you do it right, you make sure you have processes put in. All right, measure and manage what matters. And so the phrase here is whatever measurement you set up is what people will manage to. And so this is a critical part of running a business, because if you go out and you buy a product and they have certain little dashboards in your software product that everyone uses, and they measure certain things, suddenly you've basically delegated the measurement of your company to some software package, third-party thing, because everyone's going to see that they're measuring this. So you really got to think through what's being measured, and you try to measure things from the customer's perspective. So like we have real quick example, search times. We'll have people like, well, we got our component X of the search down from 350 milliseconds to 325 milliseconds. I'm like, I just don't care at all about that. It's like, who cares? No one knows. But what are the top 5 functions that somebody uses our software for, and how long does that take? Oh, they all take this amount. And how long does that extra 125 milliseconds you shaved off impact that? It doesn't impact it at all. Stop working on it. Like, don't work ever again on that, because we don't care. We care about this other thing that took 2 seconds. Make it 1. And so that's thinking about it from the customer, not some technical guy who's really great and focused on that. All right, easy to understand, if it's not easy to understand, it never gets measured. If it's got to be easy to quantify and track, if it's easy to understand, no one's ever going to try to figure it out. Here, if you can't easily measure it, it never gets measured. And then it needs to be communicated appropriately so that people know that that's actually what you're measuring. Because if they don't know that, it won't have any impact. Okay, focus continuous improvement. Coming to the home stretch here. This is an important one. Always try to improve everything. And this is where ego is a career killer. Because if you think like, man, my department's awesome. Like, what possibly could I improve in my department? Then you're not buying into continuous improvement. You always got to get better. And so people have to have that approach that I know I'm doing a good job and everything, but I'm going to frequently have meetings on how to improve all the processes. And so you want to reject the status quo, and that becomes interesting when you get you're bigger, longer in your company, and you're bringing in new employees, and they come up with better ideas than you have. And so that's when it's a good test, because companies where egos too is a big thing, they're not going to listen to the new guy. I've been doing this for a long time. You can that's great. Go tell your girlfriend or your wife or something. I don't want to hear it, or your boyfriend or whatever. But if it's another company with a more intelligent approach, they would say, thank you, I love it. And so we actually have people who've been there a year making presentations to people like us, like me, who've been here 35 years. Because they actually do the job, not me. I'm not doing that kind of job anymore. Without change, there is no progress. So when someone says, I don't like change, and everyone says people don't like change, that's a cop-out. People have no problem with change if it's good for them. If I said, you know what we're going to do? We're going to change things here at UNH. What's going to happen is, all you have to do is show up for class, y'all get A's. You okay with that change? No, it's a pretty good change. I'll take that. And we're also going to let you pick out your car. Y'all get a car. Well, those are pretty good changes. People are afraid of how change will impact them negatively. And so you got to get them over that. And so it's like when you talk about focusing on continuous improvement, so don't be thinking about it as change and bad. Think of it as positive. We're making things better. All right, so it's time for the activity. And I saw some writing after I threatened everybody, or I don't know if I threatened them. I observed that there wasn't a lot of writing going on. So what we want to do is we're going to take 5 minutes. So, okay, we're going to do it in 5 minutes. You're paying attention, right, Ian? You're my guy. And so just fill out your spreadsheet. If you've already kind of got it, that's great. But just think about it. And the reason I have these multiple passes is if you've been taking notes, I see there's a lot of notes, you might do the second pass, I've been thinking about that. I'm going to cross out this. I got 8 of them, or I want to go to 6, whatever. So it doesn't have to, who cares if you do all 3, right? But why don't you take 5 minutes on that, and then what we'll do is we'll have each table start talking about which EBSCO principle do we think resonated the most, and why. Then we're going to have one, if you have time, I would say focus on this one, identify the EBSCO principle that resonated the most, review a couple new ideas and come up with a new one. If you have time, you can tell me which one I should dump. But that's less important because that's about me, and this meeting's really not about me. And so let's go with, what do you want to think resonated the most and why? Because that'll probably make your list. And then come up with a new one. On your mark, get set, go. You guys have to do it too. All that time that we had extra time, we just blew it because I got talking. All right, so this is the fun part for me. If you're the spokesperson for your table, put your hand up. Oh, you didn't even figure out your spokesperson. Okay, who's a spokesperson? Okay. Everybody got your hand? Every table got a hand up? This table doesn't have a hand up. Somebody? Okay, here we go. Keep your hand up if you're really dreading talking. You don't want to do it at all. Why would I actually do that? That was just a joke. I think we're not going to do that. What we'll do is we'll just kind of have some dialogue. People can kind of just talk as they want to, but now you're prepared. So let's talk about that first part of the exercise, the EBSCO principle that resonated the most and why. So go ahead, go.
Yeah, I like the operating with vision and a bias for action.
Okay. And tell us why.
I think, it really kind of especially for folks who may not necessarily have managerial tasks, I think buying into that mindset and buying into, the fact that they can, have and develop that vision and, through the lens of helping the company, become what they can be. And then obviously then not just having that vision and thinking and developing that vision, but then actually doing it and, kind of taking risks and asking for forgiveness later.
No, I think that's the kind of culture you want. Because other cultures are risk averse and nothing really happens. And it's all, I find that people, myself for sure, but I think generally for a lot of folks I've come across, successful people, at the end of the day, they want to feel productive. You want to feel productive. You did something. And so if you understand the vision and you share that context and you feel like the stuff you're working on, you have pretty good clarity that it's going towards your vision, you feel productive. You may or may not be productive, But you feel like, hey, I'm part of something. There's a sense of community that gets involved. I'm part of this vision. We're all together part of the vision, so you get this community. You feel productive. But then you have to stop and step back and say, as a team, we met all our goals, but is this actually working? Then you might change your vision. So I like that one too. Anybody else want to throw one out? Yep.
We talked about investing in people because you can sell any product, but there has to be someone marketing the product, making the product,
Yeah.
And all of these different things. They all involve people, and if you don't invest in each of those people, then you're essentially just losing the culture, sort of in general. So we all really resonated with that principle overall.
Scott? Anybody else want to throw it out? Yes, sir.
Just credibility, reputation, promising low, delivering high.
Okay, so kind of the more like the do what you say you will do, or I like that point. So that might be a new one. You might actually focus on that as one of your principles. I guess it would be focus on the customer and the end user. Okay. It's amazing just how important that concept is, that people get so excited that they just talk about everything the company's going to do, and everyone likes to talk about things they're not doing yet. And so that's the way not to make the sale. People think it's the way to make the sale. We're going to be doing this thing in the future. Like, that just sets an expectation that you may or may not meet. Why don't you talk about the things you actually do, because they're excited about it. And so it's like one part of selling is don't talk about the stuff that doesn't exist yet. Talk about what you got now. Maximize your sales that way. So I like that one. Anybody else want to? Yes, sir.
The old table will go with lead with humility.
The old table, the wise table, will lead with humility. Tell me why.
Well, especially being a founder, it's very easy to believe that your vision, your kind of vision of the world and how your product should be is exactly how it will be in the real world. But as a founder, you got to ask the tough questions, go to the root of it, and understand why things are the way they are. And so it takes a certain amount of humility to go in, make some mistakes, ask the questions that you believe are too easy. The amount of times Ian has shaking his head during pitch competition, but I think that's very important.
Yeah, I think this is why it's hard to have pick one or two, because all the ones that I mentioned, they're good, right? And lead with humility is one that there's ways to lead with humility, and so people, to some extent, I feel like there's born leaders. You learn how to manage, but there's sort of born innate leadership qualities. And so when you find people who have born innate leadership qualities, but they're not humble, it can be a challenge, because they've grown up in a certain way, but you have to really attack it. And you can actually, there's ways to learn it. Like if you were to look up servant leadership, if you look up servant leadership and read about it, there's articles in there like the 12 principles around servant leadership. And it feels like a weird thing, servant leadership. I'm the leader, yet I'm serving others. That is about leading with humility. And when you read that stuff, it's really obvious. But I should have said this earlier, but in all this stuff, like all these points, a lot of times people will say, or I know they're thinking, a lot of this stuff's kind of really obvious. Like, duh, I have a vision, And you know why you think that? Because it is, actually. But the hard part is actually writing it down, thinking about it, and having your actions to be consistent with the obvious goal. And so a lot of the stuff is kind of fundamental stuff. Do what you say you will do. That's really unique. But if you just sort of blow it off and you don't act in a way consistent with that, you're not going to be successful. And so it's like, that's why you write these things down and you get other people to think about them, then you hold yourself accountable. And so we actually in meetings, we'll use these kind of in a way against ourselves. Like, why are you so defensive about that process? Remember, foster continuous improvement. Why are you telling me that your way is the right way? You got to listen. And so you kind of hold yourself accountable through all this. All right, you guys can't answer because you gave me good examples of which ones to kill. And so we have a good stuff here, but I don't want to make it easy on anybody else. Any principles that you just, because there's a lot here. Which one would you get rid of? I'm not going to be offended. Okay, go ahead.
We chose to get rid of 6. We liked all of them.
6 of them? Oh
Yeah.
my God.
No. Number 6.
Number 6?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And why, just because did it seem repetitive, or?
No, we just thought that it was more important to focus on your employees, your people, and leading with humility. And
Yeah.
you focus on that stuff, not the profit.
It's interesting. This table kind of had a similar thing where they said, make it part of one. Maybe have a line in your description on Realize Business is a long-run game, but talk about, business is sustainable, because they are very similar. I like that, so I wrote it down. I think we'll probably do that. It'll save paper anyway on all these printouts that I give to people. Now, so that's good, awesome. On the back, you had one, I think, to get rid of?
Yeah, we said foster continuous improvement. We felt like if you're doing the rest of them, then it'll just lead to that, and it's sort of like a broad term.
Oh, that hurt. Oh, that one hurt. No, that's one that, see, I'm defensive. I'm not learning properly. Yeah, I see what you're saying, though, because that's the thing, they all relate to each other. And so it's like, do you get rid of that, or do I put that into a, like you could say these could be merged because, you're managing you're managing the things you're measuring, and while you're doing that, to try to do better, and how do you do that? You improve. So I get your point. It's a bit repetitive for all this stuff, because if you're going to try to have better quality, then you're going to have continuous improvement. So I like that. That's good. Anybody else?
So yeah, you could merge 10 with 6 as well.
10 and 6.
Just the continuous improvement or growth or evolution of your business kind of thing as well.
Yeah, I think the thing that this one that I like about this that's a little different than that is that, like, you can continuously improve everything, but then you have to be kind of guided by the principle of profit, because you could make the best thing ever and you could continuously improve, but then you find out that your widget went from $2 to $28 and nobody will buy anything over 10. So do you want to be a Rolls Royce and have the best car out there and sell 2,800 a year? I don't know what they sell. Or do you want to be somebody else and sell 28,000? And so it's they're kind of different. I don't know. I got to be less defensive on this. Okay, we'll stop this because now I'm going to. Any new ones? I know it's kind of hard coming up with a new one in 10 minutes, but we'll go in the back here.
We talked about promoting individual, individual passions and entrepreneurship within yourself. Like companies like 3M or Google have initiatives where they allow for projects on your own during company time, and a lot of good ideas come out of those that can be applied to the business as a whole.
There's this thing I was mentioning to the table here. This framework we use called SAFE, the Scaled Agile Framework for Enterprise. It's basically lean principles for big software houses. And they have, every month you go through a PI, program increment. Every month you plan everything. And in the month you have 6 iterations of a couple weeks. And I6, so the 6th iteration, is all about that. It's called the innovation iteration. And so what they do is you allow people to go work on whatever they want to work on, within reason. It's got to be company related. You can't go home and do a painting or something, but something, company related. Now, what invariably happens is that about half of that time gets spent on doing all the stuff that didn't get done in the first 5, but you get about a good solid week of doing it. So that's good. And so you would kind of elevate that to, so you have to think about how to word that, but that's part of the challenge, try to word something. You had one, I think? Yeah.
Yeah, stolen from Ray Dalio, but radical transparency and truthfulness.
Radical transparency and truthfulness. That's interesting. When we get to the culture part, we don't say that, but we talk a lot about that. So that's interesting to actually make that one of the principles. I like it. All right, Time Master, how are we doing? We got plenty of time, right?
Right on schedule.
Yeah, I think we're actually doing pretty good. So let's take a little bit more. Another new one.
We said encourage new ideas and communication.
Encourage new ideas in communication. So you're also encouraging communication. Communication, were you thinking internal across employees or external communication? When you when you say internal? Yeah. So that's another interesting one. We'll talk when we get to the culture side. You'll see that we talk a lot about that and the importance of that. And so my reaction to that is that's good, and maybe it belongs as one of the principles too. Encourage new ideas in internal communication. And that could sort of become, there's an element of that, foster continuous improvement. We want your new ideas, but there's really not an element of I mean, I guess there's an element of communication in this. But I think part of what comes out of this, hopefully for everybody, and it does for me, is how everything sort of relates to each other. And so, it's amazing how much time like I and others put into this, and because we can all word them different ways. And so that's where the challenge is. I do think that getting it down to a few less when you do yours is probably better. 6, 8 is probably better. I think, did someone else have a hand up for a new one? I don't want to, can't scratch your head, you get called on. No.
One that we discussed was like a happy environment leads to a focused environment or productive environment.
So would that be sort of related to this, but not so
and
much?
just making sure you're sort of like your employees and customers are satisfied and happy with what they're doing and sort of feel valued in that way. So they'll work harder.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. That what's coming out for me is when you'll hear the next presentation, some of these themes will come out. Empathy and recognition, and is really important for. We talk about lead with humility and the servant leadership. That's a lot of what that's about. Is recognizing people. I have a thing where, everybody know what a 360 is? You guys ever hear about like a 360? You've heard of it, yeah. So what a 360 is in like management is they say you're going to do a 360. You're going to self-evaluate yourself. You fill out this big form. Here's all the things I'm wonderful. I'm not good at whatever. And then your employees do the same thing. And then they put it together and you sort of see. And it's about self-awareness and sort of realizing your things. And so I found it really interesting when I had my first one, probably 20 years into my business, into my experience with business. So they said, you're some positives, right? Because obviously some things have gone well. But here's the things that are bad. Like, you're not a team builder, and you lack empathy. My reaction to that was like, what? Like, what do you think I've been doing? Like, we got a big team. We got 1,000, 2,000 employees. And they were like, you build teams for the purpose of getting something done. You don't actually think about how the team dynamics work within each other and whether they're the most productive team. You're great at coming up with the vision, the bias for action. You put a team together, and then you go off to the next thing. But you don't actually spend the time to try to really make that team work as effectively as possible. And I was like, you're right. I'm off to the next thing. And so that's part of why we did this SAFE thing, because SAFE is all about teams. And you have an ART is a agile release team, a group of teams, like a team of 8 people. Then you have 8 teams of 8. That's an ART. And it's all about trying to measure how these teams are productive individually and with each other. And so that was one thing. So they were right. The other one is you don't have empathy. And I'm like, I was kind of defensive on that because like I have a nonprofit. I'm pretty generous and like I have empathy. I'm helping others. I'm doing all kinds of things. Like, yeah, but you don't show it. You'll be walking. We have a campus. We have like 3 or 4 buildings on our campus, and so we'll be walking through the buildings, and people will like want to say hi to me, and I'll be doing one of these. I'm walking through the buildings, and I'm doing, and so what they're thinking is, I can't swear, right? So they're thinking, what's the deal with that guy? We all know what I'm thinking of saying. What I'm thinking is, do you realize like I'm going to a presentation, and I'm going to lead this presentation with 50 people, and I'm busy, and I just hung up with this other thing, and I'm figuring out what the hell I'm going to say. But they don't care, and so you have to, and you don't show appreciation enough. And so, like the people who work directly for me, I asked them, like people who work directly for me or knew me, I'm like, do you think? Give me some feedback. No, you're right. You do have empathy, and we understand it. But if you're not in the top 50, people see you totally differently, because they don't have that exposure to you. So you know what I do now? Because I still am so driven, and I'm just bias for action. I actually have a group, have all my managers every 2 weeks. We have actually every week, but I send them every 2 weeks. Every week, these people go out and they ask our managers, who do you think Tim should thank this week? Because I want to be empathetic, but I can't. Like, I don't know if you were all employees and I didn't know what y'all did, I wouldn't know I was supposed to thank you because you worked really hard last week. I don't know that. How would I know that? I saw you in the cafeteria one time. I don't know. Maybe I didn't see you. And so realizing that empathy is so important, that's how we do it. So anyway, I got off on a little bit of a tangent there, but those are the kind of things like the self-awareness, the leading with humility. You got to understand how you come across to people, and so it kind of matters. In a lot of ways, it matters more what they think of you than what you actually do if you're going to be a leader. What's the way they phrase it? Employees will listen to what you say. They really will, but they'll listen. They'll be more impacted by what you do. So you can say all the right things, but if you're walking between buildings, then that's what they think of you. And so you have to, so what I would do now, I'd go to the cafeteria. We don't have a cafeteria anymore because of COVID and everything. But I'd go down there and I'd just take 15 minutes every like third day and I would just go talk to people. It's actually interesting. It's kind of fun. But I had to get over this, like, I have to work every minute or else I'm not doing my job. You know, get over that. Actually, your job is to do some of this other stuff too. All right, so we got some new ones. We canceled a couple. The other one you guys came up with was put 10 into 2. So I think I might have referenced that. You know, foster continuous improvement could potentially be in that, you know. Any final ones? Any last comments before we go to the next one? Yes?
I'd say realize that making mistakes is part of the process and cultivate a culture where people aren't limited by the fear of being wrong.
So realize that making mistakes is part of the process. What was the second part?
Cultivate a culture where people aren't limited by the fear of being wrong.
Yeah, okay. So I think I'm going to use that. Do I owe you a royalty or anything, or like how's that work? I get these ideas free, right?
College tuition.
That's it. Just a one-time payment. He's good. Yeah, he's good. All right, I like that, and that'll come up a little bit in culture too. But I like it. That's a good one, and that's a lot of what we're talking about. So let's switch over and we'll go to culture. Any last thing anybody wants to share before we go to culture? You ready? Okay. I still can't believe I did a 1.5 hour schedule for a 2-hour meeting. Like, pretty impressive, huh? Yeah. All right. So, we got to get over to our new thing here. So you're going to have an activity at the end of this. You kind of probably got the drill, you know. So here we'll be talking about filling out the worksheet, coming up with a list of 10, so 5 individual and 5 team, what I call cultural elements. So it'll make sense as we go through this, but we have these characteristics of how you would characterize individuals and these traits that people that have been successful and kind of fit with our culture exhibit. And so I'll talk about the 5 that we've identified for us, and you guys can think about that. And the same idea, which ones could you kind of lose? What would you like to add your new one? That kind of thing. And then we have 5 team ones or group ones, how we kind of work together. And so we'll do the same thing. You kind of go through that, work on your own. Then you'll have the same kind of discussion. The idea here is to come up with one, what culture element resonated the most out of the EBSCO ones, and then review some ideas and come up with ones that you want to come up with new ones. I said I didn't have the which ones did you dump from ours, which you can, but it's more important to kind of focus on you. And I thought 2 different activities might take longer, so 2 different sections of the activity. So that's the idea for individual. One that really kind of popped out. Review some ideas, come up with the one that you want to add, and then the same thing for team. Okay, you guys you're experts now. All right, so here we go. Our culture. So this is a actual screenshot from I think it is, yeah, from some stuff that we created. And so we talk about our individual attributes. We talk about how we show up. Ours actually looks better. I kind of pasted some things together, but that's kind of the branding. How we show up, for each other. These are individual, your own behavior, and then how we work together. And so I'm going to go through and try to spend a little time on each one. And then since we have till 8, so we're going to do. I think I'll give myself 20 minutes for this, so that would be right after the 7:38. Okay. Watch me. Okay. All right, here we go. So, this one I think is I put it first for a reason. I feel like from all the people I've seen who've been successful, and defining success is important because, it's always successful is they have the most people working for them. No, that's if that's your desire, you probably got a problem. Why do you really care about that? But if you want to be a manager of people, then that could be that could be something that would do it. But you might want to be an individual contributor because that's where you feel most comfortable. And there are individual contributors in EBSCO that are adding much more value to the company than someone that manages 200 people. So success is defined as, for yourself, what is important to you in life, and then for the business component, work component of your life, what do you see as success? I want to be an individual contributor that just gets stuff done. I'm known as extremely reliable. Maybe I don't have the best new ideas. I don't want to do that, but I am an excellent customer service person, and the customers love me. They're loyal to me. That's my role. That's success. Well, that's great. That's terrific. Somebody else is, got a different thing. So, but whatever that is, whatever you define success as, it's drive, the strong personal and professional will to accomplish your objectives, and you persist in the face of obstacles, tenacity, initiative. You're basically creative. It's people who just figure out how to be successful. There's a book written by Jim Collins, not me, Jim Collins, famous one from years ago, and that they talk about, they don't quite say it the same way, but they talk about a blend of, professional will and courtesy and all that. It's like similar themes. I stole it from him. But this is one that, a little phrase I use all the time. People drive them nuts, but you do the best at everything you do. I was mentioning to this group, you get people that come in, a lot of, frankly, younger people. They work for a couple years and they kind of have that conversation like, why aren't I running the place? And they start to complain about their role. I have to tell them, if you want to do well in the company, what do you think is the best thing to do? Should you, kind of not focus on your current job and always be looking for the next thing? Or should you focus on your current job, be the best you can possibly be at it, and then keep your eye open for things that come up, and then put your hat in the ring? Because the first thing anyone's going to do when they go to promote somebody or do anything with it, to enhance your career, they're going to see how you're doing at what you do now. So that first job you're going to get, it's going to be your first job. I'm probably like the one person on the planet who I'm still doing the first job I had, with the exception of shoveling snow and things like that. But that doesn't happen very often, And so do the best you can. So I always talk about do a job, big or small, do it right or don't do it at all. I learned that. There's a quick story. I learned that as I think it was my year after, no, it was the year before, right before college. So I went up here, got to high school, and I worked on a construction job for my buddy. And so our job was, I think they were just kind of giving us a job. So we did all these odd things. And so one time we had to, clear out this work yard, and we're cutting down all of these overgrown trees and moving trucks and just, nasty work. And so we get to cutting down these trees, and the little bamboo trees, and we're cutting them all. And the guys are like, what are you doing? I'm like, well, I'm clearing this out. I'm cutting the trees. Like, you don't cut the trees. What do you mean you don't cut the trees? How would you get rid of them? You dig the trees up from their roots. I'm like, what? Like, I'm not going to do that. That's like, it's hot. Like, dig up the trees and pull them out. No way. And the guy's like, if you don't dig it up from the roots, you're just going to be doing the same thing again next year. And around here, whatever job we're given, we do it right. Do a job, big or small, do it right, or don't do it at all. And that stuck with me. So I learned two things from that experience. That phrase, which I still use. I also learned that poison sumac looks a lot like bamboo. And if that summer I had like just raw flesh here and here, because it's like, so I had poison sumac for the whole summer. But do a job, big or small, do it right or don't know. And that's something that, you get it done and you do it well. And so drive, I put as very, very high, working smart as well as hard. And then this point here, we establish goals for ourselves, stretch goals, and encourage people to push themselves. So we actually, in that whole, I'm talking more about SAFE than I thought I would, but because there's other frameworks for other things. But with SAFE, they have the concept of when that team sits down at the PIP, the Program Increment Planning Group, the quarterly meeting of 2 or 3 days, where you plan your next quarter, they have goals and they have stretch goals. And so they actually try to put out stretch goals. And the company doesn't, if someone doesn't make their stretch goal, there's no problem, But if you make a stretch goal, it's a big deal, And so we try to stretch, But so it's a good thing. So drive. Now, who do you think controls drive? Kind of an obvious answer.
Like the individual.
You control your drive. Are people born with drive? If you ask my high school buddies, a few that I still have, I hang out with high school friends, kind of interesting, but I do, and they would say, probably he had drive because he was like the best football player he could be. He wasn't a good football player, but I worked hard at it. But if you didn't know that part about me, you would not think that I would have been very successful. Point being, I wasn't born with drive. They didn't walk around being driven. They just, like you make your own drive. You just get yourself set, you make your goals, and then you do them. And so you control your drive. So if it's the number one most important thing in being successful and you control it, you control a lot of your success. Number 2, positive attitude. Now remember some of the stuff I said earlier, like some of these ideas are really obvious. Geez, never heard that one before. I tell you, this is huge. As the bumper sticker says, things happen, right? Things come up. So how you react to those things are very important. That'll really drive how successful you are and how much value you add to the company. And so we see the glass is half full and we have a can-do attitude. So we find negativity is very toxic to employee morale. You know, it's the one bad apple thing. You get a person who's negative attitude. So we will jump at it. We'll talk to people and say, you're being too negative. Like we have an issue with your attitude. You know, I'm sorry, but you're causing the whole crowd got to go down. We want you to have a positive attitude. So a problem is an opportunity to improve. Now this sounds like almost cliche, or you read that in a book, but I talk about that stuff all the time. I had a meeting today where I used that line. Like, why are we all upset about this problem? Like, it's a problem. I got it, but we're going to address it. We're going to address it in a way that's actually improves our solution that's better than the competition. So if we didn't know about this problem, we would have missed an opportunity to win in the market and be more successful and serve our customers better. So thank you for bringing it up. Like, stop being so defensive. This is a good thing. This is a positive thing. Positive attitude, opportunity. And so I got a question on this one. You might have figured out what I'm going to ask, but who controls whether you have a positive attitude or not? You do, right? So when you get up in the morning, do you ever think about that? Like, you should. And so it comes into like how because you'll be a lot happier. I always say, if you find a negative person, go let them spend their time with a bunch of other negative people. You know what I mean? I'll actually tell people that, like, you're so negative about everything. You don't seem happy here. Are you happy here? No, because of this, and this. Well, there's a lot of happy people here. And you know why they're happy? Is because they choose to look at things in a positive way, and they're excited about this stuff. And so you basically got two options, right? Change your attitude, or you're not here. And you can do that in a way people will be like, I never thought of it. You'll actually be happier. You think that everybody in life, is there anybody on the planet who everything that happens to them is positive? Like, no. So fundamental, but we made it the number 2 thing because you could just see it bring down departments and all. Eager to understand. We talk about do your homework. It's a lifelong requirement. There's other ways to say this, but it's the whole book on growth mindset. I don't know if you've ever read a book on growth mindset versus fixed mindset. It's a great book, and it kind of gets to this. Sorry, I'm looking at all these things. But people who are curious, that came up, I think, in a conversation here, like curiosity. I've always loved that. Curious people do well. They're truly interested in getting better. So if you have an eagerness to understand, you're not defensive. It fits in with a continuous improvement, And so the other part of this, eagerness to understand, is you're following facts and drawing logical conclusions. And so you're trying to understand it, and you're not just trying to get someone's opinion. You're really trying to understand the details of it. Like, why is this not working for us? And then you roll up your sleeves and you learn firsthand. So you don't just rely on a report. All the customers hate this. Well, do we have any feedback directly from the customers? No, they just hate it though. Well, why don't we have, why don't we go out and in the next month, talk to 10 customers and ask them their opinion on this point and see what they say. And if they all hate it for these reasons, we're going to do something about it. If all 10, you can ask 1,000 customers or you can ask 10. You can ask 5. Usually if you ask 5 or 10, it's enough. They're all going to kind of say something similar. If you ask 1, that's maybe you get an outlier. But generally speaking, you ask 10, 8 are going to say similar things. And so, but eagerness to understand, and it kind of, so I guess maybe I've made the point well enough, but that's very important for just how people, for your career, how you'll actually, whether you'll enjoy it or not, right? Because you'll learn more stuff. You'll find out what you like better, what you gravitate to. And so it'll help you your career path will start to mold based on what you've learned. And so if you kind of sit in your cubicle and hate your job all the time and don't really learn anything new, you're never going to be happy or as productive as you could be. You're never going to realize your potential. We talk a lot at EBSCO about realizing the company's potential by having all the employees realize their potential. And so if you're eager and you learn new stuff, then suddenly you can start to go gravitate in that area. Okay, number 4, sound judgment. Some of this stuff's really basic, but I find it just common sense is extremely. We place extremely high value on common sense at EBSCO, just like thinking through the logic. And so we talk about this and we try to make sure people realize that, don't be afraid to state an idea. If you have good logic, you just state it. And people we're not going to attack your idea. We're going to review your logic and see if we can make the logic better. And so what I do is like when I come up with if I have a thought, if I'm involved in something, I have this habit. If I write the notes and I send it out to the group, and I just share the logic. And so I call them a logic. I use the phrase logic flow. I don't know how that's what I say. I'm not sure if there's such a thing as logic flow, but it's like, here's the logic flow. And then what I'll say is, we're going to meet on this in 2 weeks. By the end of next week, send all your ideas about how you think this could be better. So you get that collaboration, everything. So it's about the logic. We're just going to use fundamental things. And this is one of the lines I use all the time. Anybody ever heard this one before? The Einstein quote? Everything should be made as simple as possible, but not simpler. And it's a great quote. And so, hard problems are complicated. And so you look at this problem, it's like, oh my God, there's just so many things. So you have to write down, how am I going to make this so that, that the average person, me, can understand it. So you break it into these simple tasks. But you can't break it into, if you break it too far down and you miss key drivers and key assumptions, key decision points, then you'll make the wrong decision. So you can't make it too simple. Some things are just complicated. And when things are just really complicated, you have to break them out into the separate, the logic flow, the separate components, and then you might divvy them up. You might say, we're going to make a decision. We have these 8 factors, and there's a lot going on here. So we're going to assign these 3 factors for these people. They're going to go get the customer feedback. We're going to assign these 3 factors to these people. They're going to go going to think about it. We're going to come back in 2 weeks, and we're going to hear what they said about the different items. We're going to put it back together, and usually what happens is those, 8 things become 6 things or 11 things or whatever, and you kind of just break it down. But that's a great, great quote, because just you break it down to something simple. Don't tell me all the details. Break it down to the key components. But that the art is going to find that right sweet spot of not too simple, so you've oversimplified it and you're not considering all the factors. But oftentimes people want to share all the details because it just makes them feel good. Look at all the things I'm dealing with. It's like that's the easy part. Just giving me a brain dump of everything is not that hard. Understanding, rolling it up into concepts and how they relate to each other. That's the value add. So sound judgment is one of the key ones. The whole thing on decision making, devote the appropriate time of making each decision. So what I'll say on that is just that, like if it's a decision, general things I've come up with that we use. If it's somebody's compensation, you move quickly because people don't want to be sitting around worried about the compensation forever. If it's and this can be with the other sides of your company. For me, if it's a decision under 50,000, make it in 5 minutes, because it doesn't really matter. Like it's not going to move the needle at all in our company. So either make it in 5 minutes or give it to somebody else to make. But just don't spend more than 5 minutes on it, because you're not. That's a waste of your time. You're not doing right by the company. So it's part of it is figure out who to make it. Anyway, you get the idea. And then if you have these rules and you use sound judgment, it's not so bad. Okay, emotional intelligence. Probably all know what emotional intelligence is, but this comes to this empathy, understanding emotions, self-awareness. I talked about the 360. And so it's amazing how many people aren't self-aware to know how you come across. And you know how you find out how you're coming across to people? Really simple way to do that I've perfected. It's taken a long time. I ask, kind of how do I come across? Am I like too intense, too much of a pushover? Like when you think of me, like how do you think of my style? How would you describe it? And after a while, it's like, oh my God, he's the title. I can't say anything. I'm gonna get fired. Once you get over that, they'll give you a lot of good feedback. So just ask. But emotional intelligence, I'm gonna go quickly. I didn't spend as much time on it just because I realized the clock, but it's an important one. All right, now we're gonna switch to how we work together. So those first ones were kind of individual, how we work our own traits, whatever. Now we're going to talk about how we work together. Trust and respect. This is like extremely important. You mentioned there's a lot of things that you talked about sort of fit in here. Basically treating people with respect. One of the biggest things I've focused on is assume positive intent. Like how many times have I had in my career where they're doing this and they assume negative intent. It's like, why are you assuming that they did that to mess up your department? Do you really think they sit around all day? How are we going to screw around with the other department? Like, I don't think do you do that? Well, we'd never do that. Well, then they're not doing it. So assume positive intent. They just don't have an awareness of what their actions are, how the actions are impacting other areas. So you assume positive intent. So you can extend trust to others. You can get burned by that. The way I've always kind of said it is we extend trust. If you break the trust, there are consequences. But we extend trust. I've never cared if somebody works a certain amount of hours a day or like, one of my things I'm probably most proud of in my career, you might find interesting, relates to this, is that when my son, who's now in college, but when he was going through like 8th grade, all those times before high school sports, my son was a little athlete, so he'd be doing lacrosse and hockey and basketball tournaments. And it would usually take, he'd be on a different team, it would take about 3/4 of the season for someone to say, because I'd go to almost all practices, I went to every game, all those tournaments, most of the practices. Sometimes they'd start at 5, but I would be there. About 3/4 of the way through, they say, wait a minute, are you the EBSCO guy? Because we're the largest employer in the North Shore, so we have more employees than anybody in my little area. And I'll be like, yeah. And they never knew that the whole time, because I didn't talk about it. And I showed up for things. Because you don't have balance. That was important to me. And so I treat other people that way. Go to your kids' thing, but get the job done. So when I was at those tournaments, I'm getting up at 3 in the morning on Saturday, and I'm working till 8 before the first game, getting all my work done. That's how I did it. But I went to those things. And so you extend that trust, and it worked out for the company because I was putting the time in. If you get burned, there are consequences. Welcome other perspectives. There's an element of diversity and inclusion in this too. Like, always professional and considerate, but and you ask for others' perspectives, and you find the quietest person in the room, and you try to pull it out of them a little bit, and say, I know you have great ideas. If you feel more comfortable, sharing those individually with an email to me, that's great, as opposed to the group, but I'd want to hear your ideas, Collaboration. So seek the best ideas. So remember this, the drill, write them down if you think they're good, ignore them if you don't, new ideas that are coming out from it. Seek the best ideas regardless of their source. So this is one, I think I referenced it earlier, like the 1-year employee coming in and listening to them more than the 30-year employee. I love doing that. And it comes back to people watch your actions more than what you say. So when someone sees me doing that, or will see you doing that running your company, that is what changes your culture. Tim actually met with that new person for like an hour, and then we actually followed up and did some of that stuff. That's hugely powerful for your culture, So seeking and listening to the opinions of others helps you gain insight while building team accountability. I want to just comment on that. And so like I've said this so many times with people, like, why do I have to ask their opinion? I know what's right for the company. It's like, well, 2 points. One is you think you know what's right for the company. So remember that lead with humility thing we talked about? So you think you know what's right for the company. You may be right, you may not be right. But let's say you are right. Let's say you know exactly what is right for the company. How would you gain from asking others? Well, what you would gain is you would gain buy-in from all those people. Because they would come up and say, hey, here's the idea. It's exactly what you thought, because you do know it. You've been around a long time. But now it's their idea. So you're going to be more successful if someone's working on their idea than your idea. So one of the biggest things we've been successful with is, with all of our acquisitions, is you find people that have passions, and you don't try to change their passion. That's the long thing. So what you're passionate about is, like, yeah, okay, that doesn't work, right? You find their passion, their goal, and you talk about alignment. And if you find somebody that's got a passion that's aligned with yours and you can get comfortable, you hire them and you get the hell out of the way. So it's all about that. And so, you want to listen to them and you want to learn, and then it's their idea, they'll drive it. Okay, collaboration. Open communication. This is the slide, Ian, that you commented on, because I think I had like 6 times the amount of text on it. Like, there's so much about open communication that it was like, this is crazy. We'll be here for 2 hours on that. But the EBSCO version has like 2 slides on this, and they're all really full, because it's absolutely critical. Team members perform better when they have context. This is why we share our strategies and results. We take the time to explain why we're doing it. And so they then share that common vision. Remember I talked earlier about people want a sense of community? And I found that, so this is where I'm a little going off script or whatever. I'm trying to be helpful to you guys, but like some things I've learned over the years where you'll often find as your company grows, in the early days, everyone's doing everything, so maybe you don't have this, but once you get sizable, people start to develop identities around their department. And so it's one of the things that drives me nuts. Like, I had somebody tell me, my goal is to be the best department within EBSCO. I'm like, that is the worst goal I've ever heard from anybody ever in my career. He's like, oh my God, what do you mean? I'm like, just think about the implications of that statement. I get where you're coming from. You want to be the best. But there's a big difference between I want to be the best department in the company and I want to be the best department we can be. Because if you think it through, I know maybe you don't mean this, but if you say this is what people hear, you are competing with everybody else in the company. Because if you're going to be the best department in the company, everybody else, you want them to be worse than you. That's not your job. Your job is to make the company the best it can be. So stop identifying as an employee of the XYZ department. Because I don't think of you that way. You should not think of yourself that way. You should think of yourself as part of the broader team. So you should be talking about how do you elevate the whole thing. Tide rises, everybody goes up. If you start focusing on your original team, then terrible. And so if you explain the vision, you explain how the departments work to each other, and you make comments like that, people start to work it. You don't have departments complaining all the time. But sometimes I feel like I'm a high-priced babysitter, because I'll be sitting in there and I'll be like, okay, today we're going to talk about this slide. Why are you guys not what's the deal? You guys are doing things that are best for your department. The customers could care less about your feelings about this and that and the other thing. So we're going to be motivated by customers and beating the competition. And we're not going to be motivated by you wanting to be the best department or some of this stuff. Happens all the time. We have the courage and integrity to make problems visible. So that came up earlier, like making sure people, your idea back there, they wrote down, realize that making mistakes is part of the process and everything. We want people to, make problems visible. That's a good thing. In your own area, if you make problems visible in your own area, that shows a lot of confidence, because you have enough confidence to admit that you're not the best, because no one has a department with nothing going wrong in it. And then it also makes other people feel good about coming up with ideas and showing the warts a little bit. What it also does is it gives you credibility. If you never, ever admit to anything wrong in your department, when you go to criticize or constructively criticize some other department or proactively suggest with a positive attitude something in the department, you have zip credibility. Okay, Mrs. Perfect, never seen you ever comment on anything wrong in your department. They don't listen to you. If you have a reputation of always exposing things that aren't going well in your area, they have a totally different reaction to you. Thank you. I know you've been trying to help your own group. Thanks for helping me. So it's how you think about it. It's open communication. We're willing to tell people what they need to hear in a respectful and supportive manner rather than what they want to hear. And we are open to receiving this input and feedback. Hugely important. All right, coming up on time, so we don't have too many more. This could be the last one, I think, if I got it right. Accountability, that was a long slide too, but I kind of boiled it down. You make sure people have clearly defined goals. They have that interdependence. They understand their interdependence. I just said it kind of unknowingly. Departments understand the vision, how they relate to each other. And their desire is to not let each other down. So you build that teamwork. It's very clear. So like when that's safe stuff, kind of down that road a little bit, but those teams talk about their interdependencies. My feature won't work unless your feature is going to work. And my feature's got to be done in iteration 3, so can you do yours in 2? It's not going to work. Okay, we horse trade, we figured out, okay, I'll go to 4, but you'll bring yours from 5 to 3. All that interdependence we talked about openly. And now you're part of a bigger team. You're the bigger team working together as opposed to, they didn't get it done on time. So you talk about that stuff up front. We acknowledge problems, take responsibility, determine what can be done to solve the problems, take action, move forward. But accountability is huge, and this is that part of fairness. I talked about the importance of fairness. And this is where I'll just maybe highlight it here, that even though, I said it before, like people want to hear certain things and you're doing great, but people actually want to hear constructive feedback. And so criticism alone is one of the worst words on the planet. There's nothing positive about criticizing someone. Does it make you feel better? If it does, maybe you should do some self-awareness there, right? Like, what's your deal? Honestly, it's probably a little too negative, maybe. Maybe you should get a positive attitude. But there's nothing positive about criticism. There is positive about constructive criticism or constructive feedback. And so constructive is, criticism is, I'm making hats. I put the hats together. You cut the material. Half the hats the material you give us is always cut wrong. You guys are useless. Well, that is criticism. Thank you. I really want to work with you after I beat you up in the parking lot. That's not a positive thing. If you say, hey, I'm finding that a lot of the stuff that's coming out of your area doesn't actually match the template. I was thinking about something. Would it be kind of cool next time you switch over and you go to put in the template for the next new kind of hat. Could you like run 1 or 2 pieces and maybe just bring them over and I'll tell you whether they fit? Like someone's going to be like, yeah, I'll do that. How hard is that? That example came to me because that actually is a real example. You know, it wasn't half the hats, but it was like 5% of the hats were throwaways. You know, and that's all they did. When they changed the line, you change your line, they'd run 1 or 2, bring it over to the other line, make sure it worked. It reduced the what they call it, shrinkage, spoilage, is some term for it in lean. You know, throwing out bad stuff. Anyway, all right. So now we got the activity. So we're at quarter of. We're going to go 5 minutes till it hits the 10 there for your individual worksheet. And if it turns out everyone's looking at each other because you've already figured it out and you want to start talking, I mean, that's okay, obviously. But we want to give you some time to kind of fill out your worksheet. Then we'll do the group exercise. And again, identifying the EBSCO culture element that kind of resonated the most from an individual perspective, coming up with a new idea, and then what's one from the team perspective kind of resonated the most, and what's the new idea. You guys ready? Haven't lost steam? Yeah. All right, good. All right, folks, we're going to go to the next phase here and ask for some feedback. I love it. People actually wanted to talk more. That's good. All righty, so let's talk about the individual culture elements or traits. All right, let's kind of start with a couple tables, just jumping out with what culture element from the individual side, and I'll put them back on the screen, kind of jumped out as the one that resonated the most. So we're talking about, we'll get there, this side here. So we're going to go with what jumped out and why, and then what's a good new one to add. Anybody want to start us off? Yes, sir.
I have positive attitude.
Positive attitude. Tell me why.
So I think, and just as I've like started to kind of build companies and just meet more accomplished people, it's been really interesting to me that like positivity is something that really like permeates through different levels, like from the earliest career all the way up to someone serial entrepreneur who's sold like multiple venture-backed startups. It's like it's something that you need to keep with you, and it's such like a core, really asset. People are attracted to positive people.
I love it. I was just going to say, you took the words right out of my mouth, as they say. People are attracted to positive people, and they aren't attracted to negative people. And those people you came across, would you describe them as? Do they look like they're having fun?
Absolutely.
Yeah, they're having a blast, right? I just find it interesting. Like you can have. I'll do a quick little story on this that works for me, but maybe you have something similar. But so, my father, my biological father died when I was in high school, so I have only certain memories of him. He was a junior. But one of the memories I have of him was we would rake leaves, and he wasn't like an entrepreneur or anything. He worked for GE, kind of normal job. But when we raked leaves, God, the guy was just so passionate about it and interesting. We would sit there and have contests, and we were like, okay, I'm going to get this section done before you. We'd get that done. And then we'd put so we can get the bigger pile of leaves. It was a blast. I looked forward to raking the leaves. Anybody else look forward to raking the leaves? Like, that's not fun. Now nowadays you just blow them all around, but the positivity, you just made a game out of it. So you can do something really kind of bad. You change the attitude. It's fun. You actually kind of look forward to it. Anyway, okay. Anybody else? You had one? Yeah.
Yeah, I liked eagerness to understand, because I feel like that growth mindset is how you do improve over time. So it's kind of interesting how the culture connects pretty well to the principles. Where one of the principles, I forgot what it was, but it was basically valuing self-improvement or continuous improvement. I think is what it said.
Focus on continuous improvement.
Yeah. So the eagerness to understand is kind of like that applied into your company culture, which I think is super valuable, because that's how you're going to produce profit growth and all of the things that keep your business alive and keep people happy.
I've thought of changing that to put the word curiosity in there or something, because I think that's such a good word, and it relates to that. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna go with the same thing. Basically, I kind of changed it to like unrelenting curiosity because one thing I have in a couple of my groups is like we have to research things in blockchain and those kinds of things. We have new tech stuff every day. We're like we don't understand it, but instead of like one of the things we talk about is instead of saying I don't understand it, I'm not gonna look at it. It's like okay, if you don't understand it, go try and learn what it is.
Yeah.
Figure out what don't you understand, and having that different mindset change. A lot of people are immediately put up a wall.
Yeah.
It's like well, I don't understand it, but let me try to figure out what's behind that. So just having that unrelenting curiosity.
And I love it, and I think that's great. I like the unrelenting. Yeah, I might steal that one too. Yeah, I think that's good. And one thing that a phrase I've used that helps people when they run into a really complicated thing, you say, the more complicated it is, the more opportunity there is. Yeah, because if it's easy to understand, all your competitors can understand it. If it's hard to understand, that's actually good. So you want the nasty ones because we'll persist and we'll solve them. Can't all be one table. All right.
So I think initially we said that positive attitude was one for how we show up. But then when we started discussing it, we realized that there probably should be a caveat in there.
Okay.
Instead of making the positive attitude like an expectation, make it really something to strive for, not necessarily something sort of like be positive or go be with other negative people. Because everyone has different things that go on in their lives personally and at work that may make a positive attitude difficult or impossible if you're depressed or anxious. So I think especially if we want to have eagerness to understand as an individual and how we show up is through understanding, then we also need to realize that you can't expect everyone to fit in a little box. And so we kind of, that's I know we weren't talking about edits, but it was sort of an interesting.
So strive for a positive attitude or something like that. No, I think sometimes my phrase is I'm not going to actually say it that way to somebody, right? But so I hear you. Yeah, you're not positive. Okay. I like that. All right, let's switch. Any new ones? Sir.
I think it kind of goes with eagerness to understand, but maybe adding independence. Being able to solve problems on your own, not having to go to somebody every time something comes up.
I think you should think about the wording. I like it, but you want to facilitate a culture of collaboration and all, and so it's maybe have the encourage. Give people we're confident in you to come up with ideas and solutions and share them with others or something. Because if you have it too much like independence, it's kind of counter to it. But I think I know what you're saying. Be a self-starter. Go for it. It's a little bit of go for it. I like it. So, yeah.
We did enable autonomy, that kind of thing.
3 minutes too.
Okay, you got it. Okay, on that, it's good. Thank you. On that, you just got to worry about that, making sure you get that collaboration there. Yeah.
Would you add behavioral intelligence?
Behavioral intelligence? Tell us what you mean by that.
Just understanding people's behaviors.
Yeah, and that's what emotional intelligence is supposed to do, and so maybe it's just another way of saying that one, but that is kind of what that's about, understanding why people behave in certain ways and getting in their head a little bit, and then understanding that they have positive intent, their framework is this, and so actually I just need to tweak it a little bit and understand it. So we're going to switch gears because this guy's tough and I got to get it done on time. So we're going to go over to the group thing. Which one? Let's go from the back now. It has to be in the back row. Which one resonated for you? Anybody in the back? Oh my God, panic. All right, go.
Collaboration.
Okay.
And I think collaboration, it's really, and my take of it was thinking about just interns versus top executives. I think everyone has something to learn from everybody, no matter what position you're in. And being able to collaborate on any level is just key to working as an effective team.
Totally embrace that thought, and you said it well. It's a challenge. And sometimes you have to kind of work hard to make sure everyone feels that way and understands it. And the world is sort of set up to be, in some ways, to the benefit of extroverts, as opposed to introverts. And so you might not know it, but I'm a big-time introvert. I probably don't come across as introverted here, maybe, right now, I don't know, whatever, however you perceive me. But I'm actually very introverted. And so, it's the world kind of likes extroverts, and so they talk. And so you have to sort of sometimes you have to give that forum for the introverts to be able to share it in a different forum, or tell them, you know, I'd like for you to do this. If you'd like me to share the idea, I want your idea, that kind of thing. It's good. Let's go with, because I think the new ideas are, let's go to new ideas. We'll finish off with any new ideas on this side, the group side. Any thoughts? Back here.
We didn't know really how to word it, but like having a strong like team dynamic sort of, and like having a team bond even before like starting any work or like progressing.
So getting so building that cohesive teams, I guess. So a lot of, this is a bit of a, maybe similar to what I've said earlier, but that's a lot of what, when you talk about those clear goals and the interdependence between teams, and people start to feel that cohesiveness and that sense of sort of buy-in and community around their team or their area or the company, when you share that vision and you bring it down to the level of what they're working on. People always want to know, like, how was what I'm doing helping the company? And so if you can bridge that gap and give them that context of this is how you're working on this feature that relates to this goal over here, they understand that, and they understand how their people over there that they're working with in different teams are also working toward that goal. You get what you're looking for, I think. You get that cohesiveness. So like, how do you build that? I think you have to build it with structures of sharing the information, oversharing, you know, and what the goals are, forcing interaction between teams that maybe, like developers, oftentimes they don't want to talk to each other, you know. You force that. We call them ceremonies. Great word. You're having a ceremony, you know, to celebrate what you did the last 2 weeks. So then they talk and they build that kind of bond. All right, so we're at time, but we'll leave it to the last slide, the test. Did you really think I was going to give you a test? Come on. QA discussion. I don't know if you guys leave right at 8, or I'm happy to hang a bit, or it's 8, right? So
5 minutes of it.
Yeah. Okay.
Then you can see out.
Yeah. However we can just do the raffle, whatever. We'll do the raffle first.
just
Yeah.
do it.
Okay. Just make myself available for any thoughts or questions you might have. I'm not offended if you don't have any. It's late. Time to go. You're welcome. Yeah, you got a question? Yeah.
And you touched on it a little bit, but I'm like in this scenario personally, so it'd be great to kind of hear your take. But how, you know, when selling to a university, did you actually get student buy-in of your software?
Yeah. What we did is in the early days, I can speak to what we did in the early days, the same thing we're doing now, is we actually paid the kids. And so what we did is, it was basically beer money, you know, I mean, that's what we'd call it, but we paid like $25 and we were selling through the library. So we went to the library and said, can you get us 10 kids, 20 kids, whatever, and we'll pay them each $25, you know, whatever the amount was, but we need them for 2 hours, like they actually, whatever, you know, the numbers, you'll work it out, but, and then what I did is, like I personally did in the early days, I'd show up and I'd make sure I was in jeans and stuff and not, you know, the guy in the suit, you know, and then we just asked them questions. We were very, we were disciplined about it. Like we didn't just have, hey, what's up? You know, it was like, here's the things you're going to do. Go try to use our software and try to answer this question. Then we just watch them. Now we got in the outer years, the later years, like now, we're pretty sophisticated. We have like the software that you can see their eyes and where their eyes go, all that kind of stuff that I can't remember the name of it. But there's a lot of stuff that we use. But basically, you're just getting their feedback. So just, you got to pay them though to get someone to, we did, yeah.
So you said your company is still private. Did you bootstrap the company, or did you go the route of like getting significant venture capital funding? And I have a follow-up question for you.
Yeah, sure. My story is somewhat unique in that we had this little idea, you know, without going through the whole detail, we had an idea that we were having a hard time raising money because our idea was probably like we needed like 2 million. It's easier to get 100 million than it is to get 2 million because nobody wants to spend the time on it. So our idea wasn't big enough, and yet I didn't come from money, and my stepfather was my stepfather, and so this thing needed to work, you know. So I actually sold early, but then to EBSCO, and they funded the growth. So we went to them we went to three companies with this business plan. You can buy us, but we're only going to sell to the one that embraces our plan, basically. And then they embraced the plan, funded it, and then we worked a deal that, you know, would provided a upside opportunity for those that made the idea work. So it's a little different it's a different day nowadays. It's better, I think, in a way, or it's just different. Now, private equity they deal with smaller companies that they're out there everywhere. It wasn't like that when I was doing it. You didn't have companies you could go to and make pitches. It really wasn't that way. It's just different. I mean, this is 85, 87. Yeah, it's very different. So I don't have great advice on that because I didn't really go through what you're probably dealing with now. So you probably don't have a follow-up question now that you know that I have no input.
I don't, but that's very interesting.
Yeah, it's a totally different kind of a deal. I mean, I know a little bit about that because I've been on the other side of that and competed with the private equities to buy things. But one more? Are you ready? Okay.
Yeah, and then we get any help. We'll see around after.
Yeah, I can hang in front. Any last question? Yeah.
When creating a company, at what stage would you say you want to have like written principles and such?
So what the question was like, at what stage do you want to have written principles? I think you can go in with, like I said earlier, I feel like I wish I had some of these down originally, at least at a high level. And so what I actually do is this is a nice little booklet with this, and for senior positions, I'll hand them the booklet and I'll go through it with them. And if they're just visibly bored, I'm not going to hire them. Like I want somebody this stuff resonates with. And so like I think as early as you can. I mean, you want to have it informed with like your business. You want to know a little bit. So, but like I might get your first team of, I don't know what the first team is. Is it 2 people? Is it 6 people? Once you get that team, I would do it then and start to build your company. I would do it as early as reasonable. Probably have ideas ready. I mean, you have all your ideas, right? You just spent 2 hours on them. You could have your original ideas and you kind of talk about it with your key first employees and it evolves and do it early. I regret, in life you want to minimize regrets, right? This is one of my regrets. I should have done this earlier.
I would just like to add, so many of you may never start a company in your life, but most of you, if not all of you, will work somewhere. And I can tell you, I've worked for small companies, I've worked for big companies, I've started my own companies. Culture and going in as part of that interview process, sometimes there's that panic, like I need to get a job, particularly like you're coming out of graduation. I will tell you, culture, it's almost worth passing on a company that you think is not a fit for you. I know it's risky, but I would just, from my own personal experience of doing it, all these principles, a lot has been centered around how would you start your own company. Almost all of you will probably work for somebody at some point. So think about these same principles into your own personal way. That I would just add that as a key piece, because that is almost as valuable as what you build in your own company. So just joining me for amazing conversation tonight. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.